The First Evangelization of the Americas. Section 1. The Christian faith crosses the ocean. This chapter will deal with the third largest wave of evangelization in the history of the Church, the one that followed the discovery of the New World. Let us briefly call to mind how this missionary endeavor unfolded. But first, an observation. Christian Europe exported its divisions as well as its faith to the new continent. At the end of the great missionary wave, the American continent would replicate exactly the same situation as in Europe, a Catholic majority in the south, with the corresponding Protestant majority in the north. Here we will only deal with the evangelization of Latin America, since it took place first, immediately after the discovery of the New World. After Christopher Columbus returned from his voyage in 1492, with reports of the existence of new lands, which he at first believed were part of India, two inseparably linked decisions were made in Catholic Spain. The first was to bring the new people into the Christian faith, and the second was to extend Spain's political sovereignty over them. To this end, a decision was obtained from Pope Alexander VI that recognized the right of Spain to rule over all the lands that were discovered 300 miles west of the Azores, and to Portugal, all those lands east of that line. Afterward, this line was shifted in favor of Portugal in order to legitimize its possession of Brazil. In this way, the future face of the Latin American continent was outlined, as well as its languages. While penetrating into a particular area, the Spanish troops would issue a proclamation that ordered the inhabitants to both embrace Christianity and to recognize the sovereignty of the King of Spain. Only a few great souls had the courage to speak out against the abuses of the conquistadors and to defend the rights of the natives. For example, the two Dominicans, Antonio de Montesinos and Bartolomé de las Casas. Partly due to the weaknesses and divisions of its local kingdoms, in little more than 50 years, the continent was under Spanish and Portuguese dominion, and was at least nominally Christian. Recent historians have tended to soften the negative judgments given in the past regarding this time of missionary activity. First, they point out that, unlike what would take place regarding the native tribes in North America and Latin America, despite their being decimated, the majority of the native peoples survived with their own language in their own territory. They were also later allowed to reclaim and recover their own identity and independence. We must also consider how the theological formation of the missionaries influenced their attitudes. These missionaries were accustomed to taking literally and rigidly applying the axiom, extra ecclesiam nulla salus. Outside the church, there is no salvation. Therefore, they were convinced that they needed to baptize as many people in the shortest time possible in order to ensure their eternal salvation. It is worth considering this axiom for a moment, since it was such a weighty factor in their evangelization. It was formulated in the 3rd century by Origen, and above all by St. Cyprian. At first, it did not deal with the salvation of non-Christians, but only that of Christians. It was directed exclusively at the heretics and schismatics at the time, and reminded them that they were guilty of grave sin in breaking ecclesial communion. Therefore, they excluded themselves from salvation.